Hello, welcome to my husband. Welcome. Chapter 60. We'll just hold hands and sleep. You trust me, right? I guess this is our bedroom now, Aristine said, and Tarkan paused once he heard that. Our bedroom? Tarkan and Aristine's marital bedroom. Unlike Selvinus, a wife and husband in Irigo essentially share one room. In other words, it was the bedroom that Aristine and Tarkan were going to share from now on. Of course, Tarkan had planned to find another bedchamber and sleep separately. While Tarkan was hesitating, Aristine casually opened the door, and the sight revealed before them was la la la. The bedroom looked like it should be accompanied by that kind of sound effect. Both Aristine and Tarkan rose like fossils in the doorway. The room was huge. The bridal chamber truly could not be described as anything but huge. The dozens of candles that decorated the room flickered with a reddish orange, dimly illuminating the bridal room. There were scented candles on the table, alluring flower bouquets, pink champagne in an elegant bucket, and a bed in the middle. Red rose petals were laid in a heart on the immaculate white blanket. A crystal and an aquamarine, called the Queen of the Night, were hung around the hearth, and they reflected the light of the candles, embroidering it onto the bed. Thanks to that, the bed was the only shimmering in the dark room, and it shone a bright white. The bed was small compared to the size of the room, so it looked more intimate. Forget comparison. The bed was really small. There might be quite some space left if I was still lay down on it, but it would be hard for someone of Tarkin's stature to lie down comfortably. So if the two of them lay down together, they could never be far apart. It was a perfect snack bed. Furthermore, there was delicate lace curtain attached to the four corners of the bedspot, creating a more intimate atmosphere. Sha-la-la-la-la, sha-la-la-la, dun dun dun. It felt like that noise was continuously echoing in the background. Both Aristine, who was ready to go to sleep early, and Tarkan, who had been somewhat anxious earlier, couldn't even step into the room. The vast sky was high in the atmosphere, the constellations and the Milky Way embroidered in the night sky. The humid wind was filled with the scent of flowers and gently lifted people's spirits. It was truly a romantic night, perfect for the fight night of the new. Knights from the bride's home stood guard for the new bride in front of Tarkan's resting palace. This was to show the status and prestige of the bride. Normally, knights in sparkly robes would be standing imposingly for the sake of the lady they serve, but I can't even go to sleep. Seriously? What is this? We're out here suffering for a woman not even worth being called a princess. Tch! A Sylvanus knight spat on the ground. Far from looking imposing, Aristine's home country knights were sitting around like good-for-nothings in a back alley. Their faces were flushes and their breaths smelled of strong alcohol. They were already so drunk that they couldn't even stand guard properly. Someone else is busy enjoying it. I don't see why we have to stay up all night. Exactly what I'm saying. Things might change if it's us, though. At those words, the knights snickered among themselves. Their laughter was rather vulgar. If it was me, forget the night. I can do it without a break until broad daylight. As expected of you, Captain, your ability is like no other. The knights praised their head knight. The head knight snorted arrogantly. No matter how much I think about it, I think it's such a waste to give it to that barbarian. You might be an uneducated half-wit with a nasty personality, but there's no need for words when doing that. Anyway, true, all you're going to hear is the other sounds, no words. It's a pity we could only watch the whole day. If not for this political marriage, they would have already shown the princess the bitter side of life. However, this was an issue that could result in an annulment of the marriage, so they could only keep their hands off, because if that happened, the emperor would not forgive them. The barbarian must be having fun by now, the head knight said with a twisted smile. He gave the resting palace a good glance. That wench. It's quite pitiful, I'll say. He had drunk himself to the ground, and even the knights were trying to curry favor with him, so he threw away even the slightest rationality he had. If a great knight like me treats her nice, she'll be begging for more. He had to compensate for his pride being trampled by Aristine during the day, and to do that, he acted strong by dragging Aristine's name through the mud. It was as if he was regaining his self-esteem by uttering those vulgar words. Of course, just looking at those eyes, you can tell what she wants. Isn't she just deliberately revealing to stimulate your lust for conquest? This is why such a lowly wench can be considered a noble princess. But can you imagine the taste, though? Like a fox. Right. That's why I have to hurry up and get that barbarian away and put that wench under me. Who? What do you mean, who? Of course, that arrogant. The head knight who was answering the sudden question felt like something was off. For some reason, he was stuck with an ominous feeling and stopped talking as he slowly turned to where the voice came from. An enormous ghastly monster was looking down at him with a single gleaming eye. At that gruesome sight, the head knight unconsciously tried to stand up, but his legs fumbled and he fell. His mind was shocked awake, but his alcohol-filled body did not listen to him. The demonic beast? Why is there a beast here? This was the royal palace, in the middle of the royal capital. The other knights also retreated in fear, and stumbled into each other as they staggered and fell to the floor. Seeing the knights falling in an unsightly manner, Bukali's face distorted even more sinisterly. The knights were more frightened at the sight and trembled in place, not even thinking of getting up. That's the end of chapter 67. Chapter 68. To think these bastards are knights. The Salbelian knights were startled by the low voice that rang out. Is it talking? Only then did they realize that the horrible monster was in the shape of a human. Their vision, which had tunneled due to the alcohol and fear, slowly began to broaden. Ah, you are that Irigo warrior. The head knight belatedly raised a corner of his lips and spoke to Mokali. As he spoke, his appearance was truly unsightly and pathetic. Every day he boasted about how the barbarians would fall apart with one swing of his sword, so it made him look even more unsightly. He couldn't help but feel conscious of the gazes of his subordinates, and puffed his chest in an attempt to act dignified. But with his frighteningly pale face and trembling body, he was almost pitiful to look at. Unaware of this fact, the head knight deluded himself to think he upheld his courage against the disgusting barbarian. It looks more repulsive and hideous up close. He frowned as he looked at Mukali's face. Despite knowing about it, it was horrible enough that he was confused whether the man was human or demonic. His seemingly rotten left eye was quite a noticeable feature, so the Salvanian knights already knew Mukali's face. When he passed by, they mimicked his face and mocked him from afar, so they were also aware that Mukali was unsatisfied with the princess. It was a serious offense to say such vulgar words about the princess, and there was nothing they could say even if they were immediately taken to prison. Since the person who caught them was Mukali, the head knight figured it wasn't too bad. Come to think of it, you don't like the princess that much either, right? The head knight asked Mukali, pretending to be relaxed while conscious of his subordinates who were looking at him. How about joining us? Honestly, I didn't want to be next to such a hideous savage for even 1 second, but after seeing Mukali's iron-like face, he couldn't say such things. I get why you don't like the princess. No man likes a rigid woman who doesn't know her place. The head knight nodded as if he was well knowing. Then he lowered his voice and whispered to Mukali, "The more they act like that, the more you need to tame them, and they become more vicious." His dirty hands gestures were a bonus. The head knight grinned wildly. There was no man who didn't like talking about such things, even more so when the other party was a savage who looked like a beast. Just as he expected, Mukali opened his mouth. Seemingly interesting. Like I said, who? The head knight frowned at the reply, which was different from his expression. The man should have understood after he said this much. I guess he can't understand because he's a stupid barbarian. He tried to hide his thoughts and replied, "Of course. I mean, then princess, what do you think?" So you were really talking about the princess. Indeed. Although that wench has a temper, her looks are... The head knight couldn't even finish this sentence. Fuck. The sound of bones cracking rang out as the head knight's jaw dislocated. It didn't stop there. His body was unable to withstand the force, and spun as he was swept on the floor. Crash! The Sylvanus knights froze and stared at his fallen visage in shock. They didn't know how to react. His landed like that. The head knight trembled spasmodically as he was thrown onto the floor. It was only after hearing his feeble groans that the knights hurriedly rushed to the head knight like they'd been released from the lock. "Are you okay, sir?" "Captain!" The head knight barely managed to lift his upper body with the help of the knights. His cheek had turned red and swollen after being hit by the iron fist, and there seemed to be a problem with his bones. He could barely open the eye on the side that he was hit, and perhaps a blood vessel had burst because the whites of his eyes were stained with blood. "Captain? What the—" He looked wretched, as if he had been hit dozens of times instead of just once on the cheek. Ugh, ugh, ugh. His tongue was swollen, so the knights couldn't really understand what the head knight was saying. There seemed to be a cat in his mouth, because his mouth was licking blood soak, and 2 teeth were protruding to the point that it was embarrassing to look at him straight into the face. "What the hell do you think you're doing? We will formally protest this matter. How dare you be so violent? As expected, you barbarians are." The knights of Sylvanus were enraged and began to raise their voice, but when they saw Mukali's face, they flinched. When they saw Mukali's terrifying face, they realized it wasn't the time to act strong. Oh dear. Right then, someone walked out from behind Mukali. He looked at the head knight's face and shook his head in resignation. "You've done it again." It was Jacqueline. "Harkins' strategies. He deserves to be hit." "You always say that after hitting people. But this guy, I know." Jacqueline replied. Then he lifted the head knight to his feet. Saying he lifted was a lie, because he practically grabbed the man by the neck and pulled him up. One. A dull sound of flesh hitting flesh rang out as the head knight's face suddenly changed. The other side of his face, which had been fine so far, began to swell too. "Now you've done it too." "Yeah?" While bantering like that, Mukali and Jacqueline looked at the remaining knights, who had gone pale. Then they raised their fists. "Ka! Ah!" Durante, who was at the back watching the two of them harmoniously beat up the knights, gave a deep sigh. Now that the bastard known as the schemer had joined in, dealing with the aftermath was entirely up to him. Since it couldn't be helped, he might as well finish it up. He walked up to the head knight, who had collapsed while foaming at the mouth. Then he gently pressed down with his boots on the X between the man's legs. Ah! A terrible and chilling scream rippled through the air. Crack! X broke. Back to the front of the bridal chamber. Darken and Aristine were still frozen. There seems to be a terrible scream coming from somewhere, as if someone had lost the most precious thing in their life. But with La 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 la. An effect everywhere. It passed by their ears without any significance. Draken couldn't bring himself to take a step inside. Meanwhile, Aristine strode into the marital. She was a little surprised by the unexpected interior design, but she didn't find it strange. It might be a little crazy spending every night here, but it was much better than the place she was imprisoned at. No, I can't even compare the two of them. She walked up to the bed, then she looked at Tarkan, who was still standing at the doorway. What are you doing? You're not coming in? Then Tarkan raised a brow. Aristine tilted her head. Are you going to sleep? This time his eyes shook. Aristine lightly sat on the bed. Indeed, the court ladies were right in telling her to trust them. It was incredibly fluffy and soft. It's very fluffy. This time Tarkan's body flinched. Why is he acting like this again? Aristine looked at him doubtfully and gave up thinking about it. Too many things have happened today, and she had just taken a bath, so her whole body felt languid. Tarkan entered the room very slowly. His eyes were cautious and vigilant, like a beast that had entered an unknown territory. Aristine flung away the rose petals and dove under the blanket. As she lay sprawled comfortably, the soft bed cradled her like it was sucking her in. The blanket was also very cozy, so nice. She was in bliss. When she opened her eyes slightly, she saw Tarkan, who had approached the bed at some point, looking down at her. His expressions were complicated, and he looked like he had a lot to say. I'm sure he has a lot to say, but before that, he had to strike first. Aristine poked one hand out of the blanket and pointed to the floor. Well, you can sleep on the floor. Tarkan's face turned strange. Aristine puffed herself up like she was bracing herself. The bed must be defended. I definitely said it. I told you many times. I like the fluffy one. At those words, Tarkan's expression turned even stranger. So in other words, she wasn't asking for a fluffy bed because she expected an incredible night. It meant she was going to sleep on the soft bed while Tarkan slept on the hard floor. Aristine strengthened her resolve and looked at Tarkan with round eyes. She was never going to yield. However, Tarkan didn't even move a muscle and kept standing there. After having an intense mental battle by himself, Aristine sighed heavily. I guess it can't be helped. Aristine slowly sat up and she stretched her hand towards Tarkan. We'll just hold hands and sleep. Trust me, right? That's the end of chapter 68. Chapter 69. Tarkan looked at the outstretched hand that was confidently held out in front of him. In a weird way, what kind of woman is this? Now he was passing absurd, and it was just driving him crazy. It's okay. Aristine looked into his eyes as though reassuring him when he did respond. We'll just hold hands and sleep. I will never touch anywhere else, trust me. Her expressions looked very sincere. Tarkan felt like he had become a maiden being seduced by some rascal. From their outer appearance, it felt like things could be the opposite, and he couldn't fathom how it turned out like this. Always the crafty Aristine looked as elegant and pure as a forget-me-not flower. He wanted to dig into this woman's head to see exactly what was going inside. Aristine looked at Tarkan, who still hadn't said anything, and tilted her head. I'll do my best. She studied his face a little and said that, as if to confirm. What's supposed to mean? He didn't know what the hell she was going to do best in. He didn't even want to know. He felt like he was getting a migraine. Tarkan touched his forehead, feeling like something was ringing in his head. What should I do with this woman? Tarkan heaved a deep, lengthy sigh. It was a mystery. He decided to verify the parts that he could understand first. So when you said you wanted a fluffy bed, it meant you wanted to sleep on a fluffy bed. No other meaning behind it, just for sleeping. Purely sleeping. Mm-hmm. While I sleep on the floor. Mm-hmm. Aristine nodded her head continuously. Her face didn't show any emotion Rather, she looked at Tarkan as if she was wondering why he was asking. Ha! Tarkan forced a laugh in disbelief. He was even more speechless after being properly verifying it. No one would have ever thought of making Tarkan sleep on the hard floor without even a blanket. Even if he had a commoner mother, Tarkan was a direct descendant of the king. He had never been treated like this. However, this woman didn't seem malicious. She didn't look like she was doing this to belittle Tarkan or his lowly blood because she was of noble blood. Aristine hugged the blanket defensively. If you tell me to sleep on the floor now, you're being too much. You didn't say anything when I said I like the fluffy side. You like that bed that much? Aristine asked because she was dumbfounded. Aristine nodded her head seriously. Yes. I've always wanted to sleep on a fluffy bed. I promised myself that I would do it when I get out of there. I wanted to end the day with a clean bath, lying in a fluffy bed, and covered with a fluffy dried blanket. That way, the day can end on a happy note. Because regardless of what happened that day, her last memory would remain happy. Tarkan plopped down on the bed. The bed was truly fluffy, soft like no other. Felt like it would absorb any shock no matter what. As he listened to Aristine, he could roughly picture what kind of life she ever lived while she was confined. Still, people usually don't make their husbands sleep on the floor, and on the first night even. He mumbled. Then he suddenly shut his mouth. Didn't this sound like he wanted to sleep with her? As if he was sad that Aristine didn't even think about sleeping together, and only considered them sleeping separately. No, no, definitely no. He was just taken aback because his common sense was subverted. He certainly didn't mean it that way. Besides, just a while back, Tarkan was seriously contemplating how to safely overcome the bridal night with Aristine. When he thought about it again, he felt embarrassed. Aristine didn't even consider it, yet he went to think that she wanted him, swore it all on his own. It was pretty much his sole delusion. It wasn't his fault. In reality, many women wanted to sleep with Tarkan. Ah, thank God she doesn't know. Tarkan thought to himself as he looked at Aristine's ignorant expression. If he was already this embarrassed when she didn't know, Tarkan rubbed his face with his large hand. You're right. People don't normally put their husbands on the floor on the bridal night. I know that too. But we're different, aren't we? Aristine shrugged her shoulders. You and I just have a business relationship. Nothing more. Tarkan's mouth hardened at her attitude, which seemed to be drawing a line. The wedding alone does not mean the marriage is complete. And the most important thing in an arranged marriage is a child, of course, one that inherits the blood of both families. Tarkan frowned at Aristine's attitude. She was accepting his words as if it was only natural. Does this mean she knew? Now, the fact that she knew was surprising him. If you know, then... Tarkan, you want to do it with me? Tarkan's mouth flew shut the moment this question fell. What is this woman saying? Of course not. Tarkan's ears were flush red as he yelled. Aristine nodded her head as if she used to say that she understood. Me too. Her tone was very casual, like she was agreeing with someone saying apples are delicious. Aristine's purple eyes met Tarkan's golden eyes in the air. I don't want to do it with you either. Tarkan opened his mouth, but no sound came out, and he closed it again. Aristine gathered the rose petals that were still on the blanket and blew on them. The soft petals fluttered and flew off the bed. Even Aristine knew how important a child was in an arrangement. But I'm going to get a divorce. After making Tarkan thinking, as promised, Aristine planned to leave this place in search of freedom. However, she didn't say that out loud. After all, who announces that they're going to leave a company right after joining the company? Even if you plan on leaving for a better job after building up experience, you must say you want to bury your bones in the company at the interview. This was no different. She knew Tarkan was no bad partner. However, if she revealed that she planned on getting a divorce, he might put limits on her action. Even if he doesn't do it now, he might keep me in check when the situation changes later on. Aristine wanted to earn enough money to finance her travel. Obviously, if her business grew past a certain size, it would be restrained. Tarquin was a politically sensitive individual, so it would be strange if he didn't put restrictions. Aristine put on a smile and looked at Tarquin. Neither of us wants the other, so there's no reason to do it. That was true. However, Tarquin didn't give any reaction. Aristine watched him and frowned slightly. "Mm, I'm not that interested, but if you really want to do it, then." I definitely said I didn't want to. Tarquin spat out like he was grinding the words. Aristine gave a sweet smile. Then that settled. Her attitude was very crisp, even though his mind agreed with what she said. Tarquin couldn't hide his unease. Is that really it? Just like that? I mean, I'm not against it. Rather, this was good for him. After all, he didn't think of getting close with Aristine from the beginning. That's the end of chapter 69. Chapter 70. Aristine looked at Tarquin, who looked somewhat doubtful, and casually began to speak. "Well, the child is important, but..." Aristine gently struck a rose petal and continued offhandedly. "Don't you have another woman you like?" Diona's visit to the bride's waiting room during the day was not different from her blandly declaring that she was Tarquin's lover. Still, it wasn't hard to properly confirm. She glanced at Tarquin's face, and his golden eyes looked sharper than usual. "How did you know?" "Ah, indeed." Aristine smiled softly. "I can tell." Tarquin looked at Aristine, who was smiling, without any hint of darkness on her face. "Why?" It didn't matter if Aristine knew that he held another woman in his heart. Am I? Rather, this was a good thing, because he told her to put away his emotions in this marriage from the start. With this, it would even be more certain. So, Tarquin felt like this month was going dry. "Tarquin, you don't need to worry. I understand everything." Aristine nodded at Tarquin with a benevolent expression on her face. "We didn't get married out of love, but due to an arrangement for peace. Isn't that so?" Her tone was both quiet and gentle. "As for a child, we can think about that later. You should keep your custody for your lover." "My lover? She's..." Tarquin frowned and was about to deny it right away, but he stopped. A girl who suddenly appeared, stole his heart in an instant, and then disappeared. Tarquin wasn't even able to convey his feelings to that girl. Of course they weren't lovers. However, why am I denying it? He didn't need to deny it to Aristine. Since she had misunderstood, it was better for him to let it be. If she thought of him as someone else's man, she would never see him as the opposite sex. She is my lover." Tarquin spoke curtly and turned away. For some reason, his mood plummeted. Maybe it was because he lied. He hadn't been able to find her or convey his feelings, so maybe he felt ridiculous that he dared to call her his lover. Right. So you have to treat your lover well. Hearing Aristine say that made him feel even more annoyed. Not knowing how he was feeling, Aristine quietly approached him. "You know, Tarquin?" Her eyes looking up to him were filled with expectation and hope. "If you do well, I might hand over the position of the head of the palace to someone else." "What?" "Irigo is essentially a monogamous country, but the king is different, right? A long time ago, Irigo was basically polygamous, mainly because the gender ratio between men and women was unequal, because they were surrounded by demonic beasts on all sides. However, as the world developed, the demonic beasts' invasion was blocked at the border, and thanks to the periodic subjugation of the demonic beasts, the gender ratio began to balance out. And with the advancement of the modern age, monogamy was gradually established. There was only one exception to the rule, and that was the king's marriage. Because the king's marriage had political ties, concubines other than the queen were left as they were. When you ascend to the throne, the queen will naturally be me, as I am the princess. What I'm saying is favorable for you." Lycan couldn't understand Aristine, who was giving him a gaze that seemed to say that. I don't particularly desire the position of queen, so I can concede it to someone else at the time. Then I will get a divorce and get out of here. Aristine swallowed back the remainder of that sentence. What do you say? Wouldn't you prefer it if your lover becomes a queen? So what I'm saying is, Aristine gave Tarkan a confident smile, as if he couldn't refuse her offer, just like when she was first negotiating with him. We can negotiate further on this topic. Seeing Aristine talking about this with a confident smile on her face, Tarkan felt like he was boiling something in his chest. He was annoyed. A slanted smile crept onto his lips. Then I'm looking forward to it. You better not forget what you said. Of course, that's a given. Aristine smiled brightly. He felt even more frustrated. Tarkan lifted the blanket roughly, and remaining rose petals on the bed poured down. He snorted and lay down on the bed. He didn't even glance at Aristine, just stared at the ceiling. But either way, he was laying down next to her. As Aristine lay down again, Ram's touch due to the cramped bed. Tarkan's forehead squeezed at the hot, yet soft and supple sensation. His body couldn't help but stiffen. This was just because he had never lain next to a woman before. Oh, right. We have to look like we had the first night to other people. Aristine, who was lying right next to him, turned to him and said. The warm breath touched his ear like a wave. Tarkan's fingers twitched and trembled. Could I bleed? We don't have sex over the bride's purity in Europe. Besides, it's not like women always bleed on the first time. Speaking from experience, Tarkan coughed loudly, almost choking. Aristine looked at him in surprise. Tarkan's determination to not look at her seemed to have disappeared somewhere because he sat half upright and looked down at her. His face was bright red, and there were even some tears in his eyes. Aristine blandly stared at his face and asked, but our marital relationship has to look good, no? It was a marriage for peace after all, but the better the relationship was, the more political power they could obtain. It would improve Aristine's position in the royal palace and Turkey's position to sustain his power, since his bloodline was his weak point. If that wasn't the case, Aristine wouldn't have even considered having Tarkan sleep on. She would have told the servant to prepare another bed much earlier. By the way, have you ever broken a bed? That's the end of chapter 70. Chapter 71. Tarkan drummed his chest as a violent cough rose from his lungs. He was so agitated that he not only coughed violently, but he almost slipped out of the bed. His neck and chest were dyed, red as he fixed his glare at Aristine. I have never... When he spoke up to the point, his eyes met with Aristine. Tarkan instantly turned away, forgetting. Seeing Tarkan coyly turning away, Aristine tilted her head slightly. His face looked like he was going to explode. With a single poke, and seeing that, he suddenly realized something. You haven't? Oh no. Aristine let out a regretful sigh and apologized. Sorry. Tarkan turned to look at Aristine in disbelief. Aristine's expression was solemn, as though she was trying to express that she was truly sorry. That made it even more ridiculous. What the hell was going through her mind for her to be so sorry? He felt like he knew what it was, but he didn't want to know. While Tarkan's mind was exploding, Aristine was spitting out excuses. I thought you could naturally break a bed. He glanced at Tarkan from the side of her eye. His body, which was packed with tight muscles, looked firm with a glance alone, and his pectoral muscles, which were exposed through his loose night robe, looked very bulky. It's unexpected, but honestly, it's normal to not be able to break it. I hope you don't feel too hurt. Once again, Tarkan's head hurt. What part of me is getting hurt? When he spat out that question like he was chewing every letter, Aristine was startled and waved her hand. No, I really didn't mean anything bad. I know they call it a man's pride, but I didn't expect it would exactly mean to ruffle that. Like I said, when exactly did you hurt my pride? At those words, Aristine's shoulders shrunk back. Her big eyes continued to scour Tarkan's face, seemingly at a loss for what to do. Then she flashed a bright smile to comfort him and patted him on the back. Ah, of course. Our Tarkan can break beds. If it's not like that, I don't know that. Aristine clenched her fists spiritedly and nodded as if she was understanding everything. If you can break it in half, no, you can break it in fours. You just need to hit on the bed, on the bedside, and it will break. You're practically the king of beds. Huh. At this point, he was just as speechless. Tarkan exhaled, feeling ridiculous. He seriously wanted to open up this woman's tiny head. When Tarkan lowered his head and just sighed, Aristine fell a little down too. And she couldn't help but say, "Don't be too sad. You're still young, so you can get more energetic. When I make a lot of money, I'll get you so much stuff that's good for your stamina." She offered compensation as a way to apologize, but for some reason, the eyes facing her grew more aghast. "What kind of person do you think I am?" At those words, Aristine tilted her head. She already told him last time that she thought he was a pretty good partner. So, did he perhaps want to be complimented? That might be it. Ah, he can recover his bruised pride with compliment. Then I should do my best to cheer him up. Aristine resolved and looked right into Tarkan's eyes, then opened her mouth. "Well, I think you're a very shy—" Stop right there. Tarkan immediately cut her off. "I shouldn't have asked." He shook her head in resignation. He didn't want to hear the word pervert on the first night. Tarkan felt incredibly exhausted and plugged back into the bed. Aristine secretly studied his expression and carefully lay down next to him. Again, their arms touched. Their body temperature mixed together, making their skins seem like they shared the same temperature. Tarkan closed his eyes and emptied his mind, trying not to think of anything. He wanted to go straight to sleep. He didn't have the energy to deal with a woman anymore, so he wanted to just keep quiet and go to sleep. "I have never broken a bed," Tarkan said abruptly. Through the vibrations of the bed, he could feel Aristine turning slightly to look at him. Tarkan stubbornly didn't look at her and continued muttering, with his eyes still closed, "But I can break one." Hearing that, Aristine moved her hand, which was touching his, and lightly patted his arm. Yes, yes, of course. I just haven't tried. Of course, of course. As long as you try it, you can break it." Aristine's way of of comforting Tarkan like she was indulging him. The effect was amazing. Tarkan fiercely sat up. "I can really break it." The problem, however, was that the effect was counterproductive. Crack! With the crispy sound, the agar wood bed frame split into two. At the same time, the mattress collapsed. Of course, Aristine, who was laying on it, sank with it too. Aristine blinked as she lay on the mattress, which had bent into a strange shape due to the broken bed frame. Blink, blink, blink. So this is it. Oh my, the bed is gone. That kind of situation, right? It was so ridiculous that it took her a while to accept it. Aristine sprang upright. The mattress was so soft that it absorbed the entire impact, so she wasn't hurt anywhere. Wait, how am I supposed to sleep if you break the bed? Tarkan turned his head slightly. "You can sleep on the floor. I prefer a fluffy bed." And she had rambled so much about how she wanted to sleep in a good bed before marriage. So disappointing. Aristine hung her head as she sat on the limp, contorted mattress. Her anger slowly soared. Who said breaking it like this means anything? It only counts if you break it while doing it. That's why I said I just haven't tried, but I can do it if I try. That's all talk, you didn't even do it. What are you going to do if I do it? Do it. Go ahead. I'll really do it. I said do it. Tarkan's large frame moved swiftly like a beast fused with the darkness. Aristine shut her eyes at the sudden movement that blocked her view, and when she opened her eyes again, Tarkan was leaning over her. She had been sitting upright, but suddenly found herself laying down on the mattress. Her long hair was scattered over the bed due to the rush motion, and her silver hair shimmered softly under the rays of the moonlight. The dark shadow cast by Tarkan's frame covered Aristine's body. The faintly flickering candle colored half of her face as a blazing scarlet. Under that light, her purple eyes were dyed a strange color. The same went for Tarkan's golden eye. His eyes seemed like they could pierce Aristine. Their eyes met at a distance so close that they could feel each other's breaths. They were frozen in place, like the time had stopped, like their gazes were bound to each other. No one knew whether it was just a brief moment or long enough for the position of the moon to change, because they couldn't even sense the passage of time. It was a moment that seemed to last forever. Right then, crick! A grasping sound rang throughout the room, and the broken bed frame could not bear the weight and collapsed completely. That's the end of chapter 71. Chapter 72. When the mattress shook loudly, the two of them came to their senses like they were breaking out of an illusion. Hey, this position is a little wrong, don't you think? Aristine asked with an awkward smile. If it was only then that Tarkan realized how they were just laying down on the bed, her soft bosom was touching his chest, and he could feel her chest rising and falling with her breath. Because of the rough movement, Aristine's nightdress had risen to the thighs. Her legs were so pale that they stung his eyes. The gentle curve of her calf was visibly along the curve that ran along her round knee, and there his thick thigh was positioned between her two legs, with a jaw turpentine by. And violently moved himself away. The mattress rocked heavily at his ferocity. Aristine watched him turn around and ran a hand through his hair, and then she slowly sat up. What is this? She frowned slightly. She was struck with an unfamiliar feeling earlier. But she didn't know what it was. She thought about it for a while, but still couldn't figure it out, so she cleanly gave up. There was a bigger issue than that right now. How can I fix this? She looked at the remains of the bed, which could no longer function as a place to sleep. Right then, Tarkan picked up the mattress and put it down in a clear area of the floor. The mattress itself was fine. It was only out of shape because the frame that was supporting the bottom had broken. The durability was truly a miracle that mankind had created. I wonder how the Corlades got this kind of mattress. I recalled the sight of them, thumping their chest and asking her just to trust them. As expected, they are a competent bunch. They must be scouted. Aristine's desire to scout the Corlades was again reignited. Tarkan threw the scattered bed sheet nearly over the mattress and even spread it at the blanket over it tightly. Then he stood it in front of it and hesitated. He rubbed the back of his neck for no particular reason. Then he fixed his gaze at the corner of the room and spat out, "Sleep here if you want." Aristine's eyes turned to him. Tarkan didn't meet her gaze and added, "You said you like a soft bed." Perhaps the blazing scarlet candlelight was to blame, because the back of his ear, which was peeking through his hair, seemed to be red. Aristine stared at him for a moment, then she lifted the blanket. She tucked her legs inside and sat on the bed that he had made. Then she quietly opened her mouth. "Tarkan." "What?" Tarkan still didn't look at Aristine. "Where are you going to sleep?" "So you say that she'll sleep on the floor." Aristine shut her mouth. She certainly thought that, however, couldn't possibly do that after Tarkan made a bed for her and conceded it to her. They had even agreed on holding hands to sleep earlier because Tarkan didn't like sleeping on the floor. "Don't worry." Aristine looked up at Tarkan's back and said, "The moonlight slipping through the window acted as a backlight. Because of it, the tips of Tarkan's dark hair looked like they were glowing. Like I said, we're just going to hold hands and sleep." Tarkan slowly turned back to look at her. Like his back, his expression was hard to see due to the backlight. Aristine stretched out her hand to him while her lips drew a soft arc. It was a pretty natural smile. "You trust me, right?" Tarkan quietly stared at Aristine. Under the direct light of the moon, Her face seemed to be dyed a different hue than usual. She looked delicate, yet vague, but shined the bright just like the unshakable moon in the night sky. What a really strange woman. Even as the thoughts went through, there was a smile on his face that he didn't even realize. I wonder what exactly she turned those words. I didn't know why, but she seemed to think those words very persuasive. And in reality, that was true. Because after hearing Aristine say that, Tarkan changed his mind about sleeping on the floor and laid down next to Aristine. The bed was still too small for two people laying down, so their bodies were touching each other. There was a fragrance in the air, the scent of flowers from the hallway where he had walked with Aristine. Tarkan felt inexplicably uncomfortable and tried to turn to the side. Something soft and warm touched Tarkan's hand. It was a sensation he was familiar with, Aristine's hand. Tarkan held his breath. His mind seemed to have gone blank because he couldn't think of anything. He couldn't even lift a finger, as though his entire body had frozen. He stayed like that for a while, his breath caught in his chest, when Tarkan finally managed to turn his head. Aristine was already fast asleep and breathing gently. Her eyes closed. Her face looked like a fairy from a fairy tale. Her long silver lashes were dyed scarlet from the light, taking on a shade of a marigold. As the candle flickered, shadows on her face also flickered. Her delicate and elaborate face didn't have any incongruity at all. It was hard to imagine that there was an unusual and bizarre loose cannon of a soul sleeping within. Their hands holding each other grew hotter over time, perhaps because of their shared body heat. Somehow Tarkan found it hard to sleep. The sounds of birds chirping fell pleasantly into her ears. Aristine slowly opened her eyes to the silence, gently poking at the corner of her eyes. The bright morning sun stretched out his arm towards her, as if he was welcoming her to the beginning of a new day. Aristine stretched and sat up, feeling refreshed. He had a good dream and slept very well. I knew it. A fluffy bed is the best. Although the real bed lay wrecked in the middle of the room, Aristine was satisfied. She had been worried since this was the first time she had slept next to anyone. Thus the bed was quite narrow, but that was apparently not necessary. Aristine, who had slept well and refreshed, turned her head to greet the person next to her. Good morning. However, the reaction of the other party was strange. Tarkan was glaring at her with dead eyes while tightly clutching the collar of his nightrobe. His eyes were as if he was looking at a shameless person, like he was a maiden whose custody was stolen. That's the end of chapter 72. And I'm gonna leave it